of the Annapolis City Council for Monday, April 24th will be called to order at 7:10 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Alderman Lippman, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Today is National Remembrance Day, referring to the Holocaust. So I thought it would be appropriate to read a special prayer about that. Master of the universe, on this most solemn of occasions, we open our hearts, minds, and souls to you. As we remember the 6 million, the 11 million, the indifference and the evil, as we honor the heroes, the martyrs, the survivors, and the victims, we ask you to soothe our souls, to amplify our memories, to strengthen our resolve, and to hear our prayers. We ask for your presence in our midst, for healing, light, and love to soothe and ease our pain. As we commemorate the horrors that were committed not long ago, please, O Holy One, be gentle with our souls. We ask that you help us to forever remember the stories we hear. As tales of the atrocities we shared, as we re-encounter the unthinkable, we ask these memories be strengthened and never fade, in the hope that those who remember the mistakes of the past will not repeat them. Please, O Holy One, amplify our ability to remember. We ask that you strengthen our will, that you help us to ensure that the world does not again see such monstrosities. We say never again, and we dedicate ourselves to this principle, to the idea that justice does not allow persecution, that genocide shall not be repeated, and that vigilance is the responsibility of freedom at all costs. Please, O Holy One, make manifest our resolve that these horrors remain but memories. We ask that you answer our prayers. We pray that the call of evil falls on deaf ears, that those who fight for freedom and justice always prevail, that those who need protection do not become victims. We pray that the lessons we learn from this darkest hour allow all humankind to better itself and to truly and nobly embody the idea that we are each made in your image. We pray for the souls of the millions and millions of victims of this brutality. We pray that we honor their lives and their memories by observing this day and by doing everything in our power and beyond to make sure that no such shadow again darkens our world. Above all, we pray for shalom, for holiness and peace to be in our midst now and forever. Please, O Holy One, answer our prayers and bring us a world devoid of hatred, filled instead with peace. Ken ye ratzon, may this be God's will, and may we all say together, Amen.
Amen. Alderman Layton.
Thank you. I'd also like to take a moment of silence, first of all, for the family of our finance director, Mr. Bruce Miller, who lost his grandmother at the ripe old age of 110. And for the family of Mrs. Carolyn Monty Tools, who was a pillar of our community and who touched every young person in the city of Annapolis at some point in time. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panelides.
Present.
Alderman Budge.
Here.
Alderman Payone.
Present.
Alderwoman Pendell Charles.
Here.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Present.
Alderman Littman.
Present.
Alderman Kirby.
Present.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
Present. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our first item?
Mr. Mayor, the first item on the agenda is approval of agenda.
At this time, I would entertain a motion at the request of my colleagues to amend the agenda to include O2317, the Certificate of Adequate Public Facilities, Police Protection on First Reader, from Alderman Littman.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Alderman Budge.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I would like to inquire of my colleague what is of the pressing nature that we need to take up this matter this evening when no member of the public has had a chance to see this bill or understand what it is we're supposed to be voting on.
Sure, I'll be happy to answer it. First, I would point out that there's not a requirement that it be a pressing matter. This legislation was prepared in ample time to be included in the agenda. It was not. I'm sure it was just an oversight, but it has been ready to be prepared, and it is not something that is going to be voted on tonight. It's not something that we'll have a public hearing on tonight. Assuming it gets introduced tonight, it'll be first enrolled and then sent to 2 committees. We'll have ample time for anyone from the public who would have wished to have earlier notice about it. We'll have ample time to study it, question it, and present public hearing about it, attend committee meetings about it, and so on. As far as why interest in accelerating, or not even accelerating, but just making sure it gets on today's agenda as it was supposed to be on today's agenda, the underlying legislation defines what police officer is. As you know, we're under a short time frame in reviewing the budget, which refers to how many police officers the city has, but we don't yet have a definition for what police officers is. And I think that's important when we review the budget, discuss the budget in terms, and we get to the police department and talking about how many officers we have, to have some grasp of what police officer means. It's relatively simple and straightforward legislation. I don't think should endanger us of losing anyone losing any sleep over us having this just introduced on first reader tonight, as we've shown that courtesy to each other throughout the 5 years I've been on the council.
I think that without any time sensitivity on this legislation, it's a black mark on the council to introduce legislation that no one has seen. You first showed it to us on the council late last night. The public has no idea what you're introducing. As you know, we, the council, received a draft agenda a week ago Friday. We received the full agenda on Wednesday. I think waiting until Sunday night before the council meeting to introduce something signals to the public that we don't care about transparency. And I disagree with it.
Thank you. As mayor, I set the agendas for each of the meetings, and over the course of the last 4 years, I've learned that things move at a certain pace. And I put so many things on the agenda at what time, how fast we can handle them. So tonight, being dealing with the market house and the budget, I assume there's going to be a lot of public testimony and back and forth. I left this off the agenda since it wasn't pressing in nature. There was no other intention or will. I'm sure we'll get to it at some point, but that's the reason behind it. I agree with Alderman Budge. I think it's a bad precedent to add things at the last second. Alderman Kirby?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Mayor, I guess Alderman Lippman, this legislation's been ready now for a couple of weeks. So I don't know why it hasn't come forth before. I guess there was some question of when was it ready. He's assured me, and I have no reason to believe he would fib to me if the legislation's been ready for 2 weeks. That gives us a couple of weeks to find its way through the process. I intend to vote with him tonight to amend it.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles?
Yes, thank you. I do echo Alderman Budge's concerns. However, in light of what you've indicated us, Alderman Lippman, I would support it being on the agenda tonight, but I would caution all of us that we do need to be cognizant of what's put on the agenda, arguably at the last minute. I would ask that this also be referred to the Public Safety Committee, and I have just conferred with Alderwoman Finlayson, and she has no problem with that. Thank you.
There's no other discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. All right. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ceremonial items, beginning with the City Council citation to the Annapolis Film Festival.
The representatives from the film festival are here. If they could please come forward. I guess they are not here. We'll present this to them later, but I'll read it out loud for the benefit. Alderman Lippman?
I was just going to suggest if there wasn't coordination with the representatives, perhaps we just defer this item to the next meeting.
Is there any objection? No. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ID 171-17, a proclamation for Fair Housing Month, April.
Alderman Kirby, if you could please join me at the front. I'm going to read this proclamation. We have Alderman Kirby's up here with me because he's the chairman of Housing and Human Welfare in the city of Annapolis. It says, whereas in 1968, the Fair Housing Act, which guarantees the right of all citizens to dwell in the neighborhood of their choice, is one of the most important concepts of our national civil rights policy, and whereas the city and code of Annapolis make it illegal to discriminate against, you in housing, residential, commercial, real estate, financial lending based on race, color, religion, disability, marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, lawful income, national origin, or age. And whereas the ongoing struggle for dignity and housing opportunity for all is not the exclusive providence of the federal government, and whereas in pursuant of our shared goal and responsibility, by providing housing opportunities for all, the city of Annapolis joins in the national celebration of Fair Housing Month. And whereas vigorous local efforts to combat discrimination can be as effective, if not more so, than federal efforts, and whereas illegal barriers to equal opportunity of housing, no matter how subtle, diminish the rights of all. Now, therefore, I, Michael John Panelides, Mayor of the City of Annapolis, do hereby proclaim April 2017 to be Fair Housing Month in the City of Annapolis.
Well, no, just on behalf of the citizenry of the City of Annapolis, we'll accept it. Month's almost gone, but we will find a prominent place to display it, and we'll go on from here. But thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is swearing in of Police Officer Courtney Moore.
If you could please join me at the front. We've been carrying on this tradition for a little while now of swearing in new police officers, letting the community see the people that are protecting and serving them. So it's always an honor to start off our meetings in this way, and just want to say thank you. We appreciate you stepping up, serving, protecting us. You know, it's never easy to be a police officer now more than ever, so I thank you and your family for the sacrifice you're making with us. If you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland and support the Constitution and laws thereof, and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment, diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of police officer according to the Constitution and laws of this state and the Charter and Code of the City of Annapolis. Congratulations.
He should introduce his family to the...
You want to introduce your family? Absolutely.
Well, ladies first. This is my beautiful daughter, Briar Rose Moore. This is my fiance, Tracy Johnson. She's Baltimore City School Police Officer. It's my darling mother, Loretta Jones. This is my grandmother, Margaret Bracey. She just turned 80. This is my son, Caden Moore. It's my father, Harry Moore.
Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with reports by committees.
Is there any alderperson that would like to present a report? Alderman Pan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Economic Matters Committee met on April the 10th, and we reviewed 3 pieces of legislation. 01417, the lease of city property to Chesapeake Marine Tours. 01617, the Market House tenant solicitation. And lastly, 01717, Market House amendments. We recommended all of these favorably to the council as a whole. Our next meeting will be on May the 15th at 6:30 p.m. right here in these chambers. The meetings are open to the public, and I would invite the public to be here and to participate if interested. We will be covering all matters of legislation that are of interest to our particular committee at that time. Thank you.
Alderman Budge?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the council and the public, the Transportation Board met on April 18th at 6:30 p.m. We considered the appointment of Margaret Burnett to the Transportation Board and unanimously endorsed it to our fellow members on the council. That was the only piece of business on our agenda. The next meeting of the Transportation Committee will be on May 16th at 6:30 p.m. here in these council chambers.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. The Public Safety Committee met on April 10th. We took up 2 pieces of legislation, 0517, Equal Protection of Law in Annapolis, and gave a favorable report, and R717, Equal Protection Commission, and we gave a favorable report with the Rules Committee's amendments. We had a report from Acting Chief Baker. He gave us a long list of all of the new initiatives the department has embraced. And so I'm going to ask Ms. Gaines to share this list with everybody on the council, because I don't want to read through all of the items. But there are about 13 items of new initiatives that the police department is taking up right now. And so we should all be aware of those. He did speak briefly on the fact that the postponement of the promotional test had to do with timing and not individuals. So he just wanted to explain to us and the community why there was not a promotional testing taking place this month. We heard from Deputy Fire Chief Simmons on our winter relief. Our Stanton Center was open for 27 days between December and March. We housed 308 homeless residents. Mr. Beeler from the Anne Arundel County, he is the homeless coordinator from Anne Arundel County, gave us some statistics. He believes that there are between 15 and 20 homeless people in downtown Annapolis, a total of 150 to 200 in all of Anne Arundel County. And I think that was it. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 15th at 5 o'clock here in council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Environmental Matters Committee met on April 20th. We recommended favorably 01417, Chesapeake Marine Tours legislation. We had a healthy discussion about stormwater management and a lot of the current projects going on about that. We also had a robust discussion about the Forest Drive sector study, and again, this is something I'd like to bring to all of my colleagues' attention, particularly those in wards, those who represent wards 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably 8 and 1, 2 probably are affected too, your residents. I want to bring this to your attention because obviously the Forest Drive sector study impacts most of the city, but also because this is, I think, going to be a relatively complicated one. There's residential neighborhoods of all types, there's commercial of all types, there's vacant properties, there's in-site development needs, I'm sorry, not in-site, brownfield sites, in other words. You have lots of properties that I think are going to be really relevant to this project that we want to see better. We want to talk about transportation, coordination among the sector. So I just encourage all of you to be involved. Some planning commission representatives were present during our meeting and asked that this project be put on their agenda. I think that's a healthy thing to have the planning commission be involved in some planning like this at an early stage. And I appreciate Director Gutwald's and Dr. Nash's presentation and willingness to include us in this presentation.
Alderman Kirby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Housing and Human Welfare Committee did meet on Wednesday, April 18, where we did take up 5 or 6 appointments. I think most of for the Commission on Aging, and there was at least one appointment to the Housing Authority Board, which all came back favorably to Council. Our next meeting will be on May 16th in this chamber at 7:30.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to offer a brief update on the budget process on the Finance Committee. We have been meeting, the meeting's schedule continues except for where it conflicts with the environmental matters once a month, Mondays and Thursdays 2 to 4 in this chamber. We've spent a number of sessions hearing from the department heads and asking questions about the mayor's budget submission. We are about to launch into the part where we start to get into amendments and debating some of the larger issues that drive the budget. So we welcome anyone to participate, and the Finance Committee's recommendations to the full council will be delivered at the meeting on the 8th of May. So, you know, 3 weeks from now. Obviously tonight's part of the process of hearing the public testimony on the budget documents is a vital part of that process as we start to get to the next phase of creating amendments, and welcome input from all of our colleagues in the budget process and potential amendments.
Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Rules and City Government Committee met on April 11th. We took up appointments and also 0517, the legislation that we'll be voting on tonight. Our next meeting will be the 9th of May in council chambers.
Thank you. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is comments by the general public.
All right. During comments by the general public, you can testify on anything that is not already scheduled for a public hearing. So if you've come here tonight to talk about the budget, the fees and fines schedule, or transportation network services, or food stores and the C2A districts, those public hearings will be immediately following this one. Nobody was signed up in advance to speak. If you'd like to come forward, now is your opportunity. Yes. And if you could state your name and address for the record, please, sir.
My name is Damon Brown from Arlington, Virginia. So, good evening, Council Chair, Council members, and other recognized officials, and of course, the Annapolis community. As I stated, my name is Damon Brown, and I'm currently U.S. Department of State employee and recently applied for Annapolis Police Chief position. I'm a doctoral candidate currently developing my dissertation, which in fact is on police effectiveness. And I'm also an organizational leadership and development scholar. As a practitioner, I was a police officer in Pittsburgh for 15 years before working for the U.S. Department of State's International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Bureau as an international police officer for over a decade. As an international police officer, ultimately obtaining the rank of Lieutenant Colonel and Deputy Contingent Commander, I have led, mentored, directed, advised national police organizations, and at times with executive powers, meaning full powers of arrest. Recently, I participated in the former President Obama's 21st Century Police Reform Forum at the White House, Police Executive Research Forum training in Baltimore, and several think tank discussions on Policing at the Cato Institute. I stay abreast of current issues and applications as they relate to community and police. A genuine partnership with the community at various levels is a core concept of 21st century policing. Additionally, collaborating with the community to find solutions and understanding of the community's desires is paramount. Realizing police effectiveness is also essential, albeit mainly through the eyes of the community. I mention all this to say, other than an automatic reply from Human Resources acknowledging receipt of my application, I have not been contacted during this current selection process, and in fact, don't know what happened to my application or who may have removed my application or eliminated me from consideration. Notably, when the announcement read, and I quote, "any equivalent combination or experience in training which provides the required knowledge, skills, and abilities." Council Chair, Council members, given the aforementioned, I respectfully ask to be granted an interview for the position of Analyst Police Chief. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Seeing no motion, I declare comments by the general public closed. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is an update from the mayor.
All right, it's been a busy month. Yesterday was a kind of a solemn day for myself. I went to the Friends of the Jewish Chapel at the United States Naval Academy. Alderman Littman was there, and I want to thank them for inviting me to celebrate Yom HaShoah. It's the program commemorating the Holocaust at the United States Naval Academy. We had the privilege of hearing from one of the Holocaust survivors. And I have to tell you, learning about and hearing a story from a person firsthand, it changes your life and puts perspective on the issues you're dealing with and the issues we had before. So it's a very, very somber service, and I encourage everyone to attend. I also recently nominated Kimberly Cornett for confirmation as the HACA Commissioner. We're going to be interviewing, voting on her resume coming up later. Just want to say that she brings extensive financial experience to the board, along as an executive with one of the largest charitable foundations in the world. She's a director of social investment practice for the Keskridge Foundation, responsible for $350 million of impact investing for programs related to market rate investments. This will be my 5th appointment to the board. I'm also pleased I was able to stand with County Executive Steve Shue and our State's Attorney Wes Adams, the men and women of both the city and fire police departments at Station 31 in Brooklyn Park. There's a new initiative called the Safe Stations Program, which I'll get into now. So each of the Anne Arundel and Annapolis City fire stations, as well as the county's police and fire stations, are designated as safe environments for individuals for looking for a path to recovery. Anytime, day or night, they can come to these stations, and they'll have someone from the crisis response team talk with them, helping them to get in detoxification resources. Locking people up is one step of it, getting them in treatment's another one. Many times people don't know where to go for help, or they're afraid if they come forward with drugs, they'll be arrested right away. So we're opening up our police and fire stations for someone to come forward and say, I have a drug problem, I want to turn in my drugs, and can you please get me help? So it's another step in the process going forward. I want to congratulate the County Executive Steve Shue, Fire Chief Alan Graves for making us part of this partnership going forward. I also want to remind everyone that the Annapolis Fire Department and the Annapolis Public Works will be conducting inspections on all of our fire hydrants. So starting today going forward, they're going to test every single fire hydrant for capacity as a public safety measure. One of the things that come with that is you might have a decrease in your water pressure, or there may be some brown water coming out. It's not a health concern. You just have to run your water until it becomes clear. If you want more information, you can always call 410-263-7949. In terms of public safety, I want to say a thank you to our harbor master and their team. Many of you saw in the paper their quick response at a recent water rescue. Just before 1 o'clock on the afternoon of April the 8th, members of the harbor master staff, Andrew Patterson, received calls from a victim reporting an overturned sailboat in the Annapolis harbor. near the chart house. Arriving at the scene, they found two teenagers from Annapolis High School in the water struggling to get their sailboat back upright in a safe position. The winds were blowing at 23 miles an hour, at temperatures in the water at less than 50 degrees. Patterson's concern was that teens were experiencing fatigue along with hyperthermia. Due to the gusty winds and water temperatures, both teenagers and their boat were safely pulled from the water without incident. I'm extremely proud of the work of the harbor master and the team that they do. So, just wanted to say that we're out there working every single day to make sure we're keeping you safe. I also want to announce tonight, came previously with the former Mayor Moyer, talked about the Arts and Public Places Commission. There's an additional $1,000 for them in our budget, bringing their total to $15,300. I believe there was some misrepresentation that they were underfunded, bringing their total to $15,300. Historically, they've gotten a total of about $10,000, and last year it was $14,300. So the additional $1,000 will bring it up to $15,300. They do great work, and I applaud them for the creativity they do in our city. Also, I went to West Annapolis Elementary School, and they put on an outstanding Arbor Day program. I got to tell you, when you ask these kids about the environment, what can they do to help, Alderman Palin was there with me. It was fantastic to hear their answers, their excitement. They had songs about recycling, and I would say they knew much more about the environment than I did at their age. So I was proud to see the next generation coming up in the work that they're doing. We also planted a tree after there. Next item was the St. John's croquet match. St. John's won, 3-2 match. It was a close one. It was a great time, safe, secure. Everything went off without a hitch. Finally, I look forward to going to the Pearl Community Association tomorrow night with Alderwoman Rhonda Pindell-Charles. One of the things we do is we send department heads to different communities to address concerns. So, been to Ward 1, Ward 8, we're going to Ward 3. So if any member of the council or anybody from the public would like myself or members of our staff to come to their community, please let us know, and we will make ourselves available. And that concludes the update from the mayor. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is appointments, beginning with AP 07-17, the appointment of Margaret Burnett to the Transportation Board.
Is there a motion to approve the appointment of Margaret Burnett to the Transportation Board? Is there a second?
Second.
Any
Mayor,
discussion?
If it's possible, if there's no objections, that we take all the appointments altogether?
Second.
Any discussion? Yeah, I think we should read their names just for the record.
Okay. So in addition to Ms. Burnett, we have AP 08-17, the appointment of Jamie Calloway to the Human Relations Commission. AP 09-17, the appointment of Mary Harris to the Commission on Aging. AP-10-17, the appointment of Carol A. Hires to the Commission on Aging. AP-11-17, the appointment of Wayne M. Taylor to the Commission on Aging. AP-12-17, the appointment of Raymond Gerald to the Commission on Aging. AP-13-17, the appointment of Deborah Heller Proctor to the Commission on Aging. AP-14-17, the appointment of Kimberly Cornett to the Housing Authority, City of Annapolis. And AP-15-17, the appointment of Juliette Cervelon, sorry to butcher that name, to the Human Relations Commission.
Alderman Arnett?
Any of the appointees here, we should ask them to stand and be recognized if they are.
Doesn't look like anyone's here.
No.
Is there any discussion?
Well, again, I think the city is served well by all of the volunteers. We are always impressed when they come to our committees and speak to us, and we consider ourselves very lucky to have the quality of people that we have in the city that step up and do these jobs. So while we're taking this vote quickly, we're not taking it lightly, and we really do appreciate all of the help we get from that the city gets from these volunteers.
Thank you. All those in favor of the appointments, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is approval of the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar include Journal of Proceedings CCM 032717 special meeting minutes, and on second reader, O-14-17 lease of city property to Chesapeake Marine Tours Incorporated, and R-12-17 city-sponsored special events in fiscal year 2018.
Is there any objection to the consent calendar? Hearing none?
I have a question. Madam City Attorney, could you read the numbers again? I have O-14-17 and R-12-17. Was there a third one that you read?
Let me check. Yeah, just
Okay,
the minutes,
Okay,
because you're on
thank you,
proceeding
thank
minutes.
you, thank you.
I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Second. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Panalese,
Aye.
Alderman Littman,
Aye.
Alderman Kirby,
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer, Alderman Arnett,
Aye.
Alderman Bud, Alderman Keown,
Aye.
Alderman Kendall Charles,
Aye.
Alderwoman Phillips.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is public hearings, beginning with ordinance O-6-17, food stores in C2A districts for the purpose of introducing food stores as a permitted use in C2A zoning districts and removing the erroneous reference to a standard for food stores in the PM2 zoning district.
We have one person signed up to speak, and that is Barrett Lands. If you could state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Barrett Lang. I'm from Odenton, Maryland. I am the owner of Bear's Honey Pot, a local organic grocery store. We are looking to move into Maryland Avenue and open up a new organic market downtown Indianapolis.
And I would like to add that Mr. Lang had a stand at the Maryland Avenue Festival yesterday that was very popular and well attended, and we hope we can look forward to having you here in town. Thank you.
I do as well. Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward and speak? Seeing no motion, I accept into the record a memorandum to the Annapolis City Council from the Planning Commission dated April the 6th, 2017, and a memorandum from Peter Gutwald, Director of Planning and Zoning, to the Annapolis Planning Commission dated March 27th, 2017. With no one else coming forward, the public hearing on O-617 is closed. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ordinance O-20-17, Transportation Network Service Companies, for the purpose of removing from section 7.48.610 of the Code of the City of Annapolis the expiration date for imposing an assessment on transportation network service companies for trips that originate in the City of Annapolis, relocating reference to the fee associated with such trips from section 7.48.610 to the fee schedule, and matters generally relating to imposing said assessment.
No one from the public came out to speak. If you'd like to testify, now is your opportunity. Before we close the public hearing, I have a question for the Finance Department and the Legal Department too. This actually came up at lunch for the short notice. Does that just include Uber or also Lyft and the other companies as well? Because I think we should make sure we're...
I believe it is
collecting-
comprehensive to all such
Comprehensive.
service companies.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I declare the public hearing on O-2017 closed. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ordinance O-21-17, annual operating budget fiscal year 2018, for the purposes of adopting an operating budget for the City of Annapolis for fiscal year 2018, appropriating funds for expenditures for fiscal year 2018, defraying all expenses and liabilities of the City of Annapolis and levying same for the purposes specified, specifying certain duties of the Director of Finance, and specifying a rate of interest to be charged upon overdue property taxes.
Nobody was signed up in advance to speak. If you'd like to address the council, now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing open until May the 8th, 2017. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is Resolution R-15-17, Position Classifications and Pay Plan, for the purpose of approving the fiscal year 2018 Position Classification and Pay Plan effective July 1st, 2017.
There was one person signed up to speak, Harvey Blonder. I think you remarked house. Okay. Nobody signed up to speak. I'd like to come forward now to your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on R-15-17 closed. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is Resolution R-17-17, Fiscal Year 2018 Fee Schedule effective July 1st, 2017, for the purpose of specifying fees that will be charged for the use of city services for fiscal year 2018.
Nobody had signed up in advance. If you'd like to address this council, now is your chance. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on R-17-17 closed. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is Resolution R-18-17, Fiscal Year 2018 Fines Schedule effective July 1st, 2017, for the purpose of specifying fines that will be charged for fiscal year 2018.
If anybody would like to address the council, now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on R-18-17 closed. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is legislative actions on second reader, beginning with Ordinance O-5-17, Equal Protection of Law in Annapolis, for the purpose of amending the Code of the City of Annapolis to incorporate provisions applicable to city employees in the performance of their duties, and to establish an additional mechanism for sanctioning employees failing to fulfill their duties in accordance with applicable city, state, and federal laws.
Is there a motion to adopt O-5-17 on second reader?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have one set of amendments from the Rules and City Government, and I'll let the sponsor speak to them at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have two amendments. We've had a very robust discussion concerning this legislation over time. And amendment number 1, page 4, line 31, to clean up some English that Alderwoman Finlayson brought to our attention, striking the human resources manager shall provide and inserting the word providing. That cleans up the English language. Amendment number 2, we had a discussion concerning sanctions. On the one hand, we wanted employees to be serious about this, but on the other hand, we didn't want to be overly burdensome. So we're after responsibilities, that should end it, and striking and the potential disciplinary sanctions associated with a failure to fulfill such responsibilities in accordance with Chapter 3-16-120 herein. And I do have another amendment that coincides with this in the heading and the body of the legislation. If you want to take that up now, we can. That just coordinates with amendment number 2. And that would be page 1, line would be 4 through 6. It should read, Equal Protection of Law in Annapolis for the purpose of amending the Code of the City of Annapolis to incorporate provisions applicable to city employees in the performance of their duties, period. And that coincides with amendment number 2.
I'll entertain a motion if we could vote on these amendments as a group.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't get the drift of the last amendment. We don't have that.
Since we took off the sanctions in the body of the amendment, the heading of the amendment included the sanctions, so we want to strike that out as well.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Budge brought that to my attention. Thank you, Alderman Budge.
Is there any other discussion? Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes. I am uncomfortable with this legislation. Even though we made some efforts to try to clean it up so that employees are not punished in any way, our HR manager
Correct.
shared with us that every new employee receives a packet of information. And within that packet is everything that they need to know, what accountabilities there are. This just feels like another level of stuff. So I'm not sure why we are, we talk about our code being cumbersome, and we keep adding layers and repeating things that are already done. So I'm not going to oppose this. I am going to abstain from voting on it because I don't think we need to be adding another level to our already existing bureaucracy, I guess is the best word for it. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Lippman?
Just for point of clarification, right now we're discussing the amendments, not the underlying ordinance. Is that correct?
Correct. The
That's
three
correct.
amendments that have been proposed.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add one comment. First, I would like to acknowledge that Alderman Arnett voted at our Rules and City Government Committee meeting to favorably forward this legislation to the entire body of this council. Likewise, Alderman Payon did the same in our Public Safety Committee meeting. Also, Alderman Budge has indicated in his council agenda newsletter that he intends to vote in favor of this legislation tonight as well. It is my understanding that the mayor is supporting this legislation as well. Thank you very much.
All those in favor of the three amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
All right. Is there a motion to approve 0517 as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Alderman Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel comfortable or confident that this legislation was introduced with good intentions, that when we were discussing Ordinance 117, which was the non-discrimination ordinance, that there was some concern about the legality of that, and I believe that Alderwoman Pindell-Charles introduced this as something that would be less controversial and still try to touch on the same subject. So I applaud Alderwoman Pindell-Charles, and I'm confident that you introduced it all for good reasons. So I don't question that. I do question what it would accomplish. Adding the equal protection and referring to the 14th Amendment, I don't see how that serves anything, any purpose, that it's duplicative of what already exists. So that would move me to support this legislation. As I've said a number of times prior to this meeting, the Human Resources Manager provision at the end about incorporating a statement, this paragraph intrigues me, but it frankly confuses me. It says that the Human Resources Manager shall provide each employee with a statement. So is the Human Resources Manager supposed to provide each employee with a statement tomorrow if we pass this, when they're hired? There's no further information. So if you have some suggestions on clarifying that paragraph, I would be more inclined to support it. But I've raised my concern that it's vague and uncertain, and I'm concerned about proving something that is so vague and uncertain. So unless it's clarified, I think I would feel uncomfortable supporting this legislation, but I would leave that open if you want to offer any amendments to address that.
Alderwoman Pindell-Charles?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Lippman, you did send me an email the other day concerning this. We had such as I indicated earlier tonight, we did have such a robust conversation about it, and I did provide you with the reference of the video of the meeting that we had. It was too much to put in an email and frankly too much to discuss right now, but it was a long conversation that we had with our Human Resources Manager concerning that, and it would be just belaboring tonight to bring it all to bear, but that I thought, and I believe that meeting that we had the other day pretty much captured your question. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I had indicated you the minute time frames if you had an opportunity, if you chose to have opportunity to take a look at it.
Sure, and I appreciate the reference to the video, but I'm not looking for more discussion on it. I'm looking for an amendment to the legislation that removes the vagueness of this. So I still haven't seen an amendment.
And I'm not going to provide one at this time, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
That is right, sir.
Alderman Payon?
Mr. Mayor, I think that reasonable period of time can be implied for this piece of legislation and frankly others that we pass routinely that have, well, different subjects, but they don't make reference to a specific date that something will be done by. I don't think anybody would reasonably expect our HR manager to have a hand press down in her office and get this thing out tomorrow by any means. But I think a few weeks.
But that's my point. So is it just once after this legislation is passed? What about when there's a new hire? Or is this meant as is this only for prospective new hires? And I would disagree that we don't specify that. When we did the Forest Conservation Act, for instance, there was lots of agony over 30 days after this, 10 days after this, lots of specificity. And I think that's incumbent. Wouldn't be difficult to just add more clarity. It's just needs
Well,
some
I think as it reads, it's for all employees, just to remind those that are
How often?
already here.
Once? Every year? Every 5 years?
Doesn't require that.
I'm not asking for a notebook to...
When I got hired in the state's attorney's office, I really don't think I required every year to be reminded of what certain rules were. I was told at the beginning, and I'm not saying I remembered every one of them after 36 years in the office, but I'm also not saying that I needed to be reminded of every one of them also. I think that's, well, I mean, your point is well taken, but I don't think that is necessary. But that's me.
Okay.
Alderman Arnett.
2 points, Mr. Mayor. First, to emphasize Alderman Lippman's point, I did have an opportunity to speak to the HR director on this Friday. We were at another meeting, and I did sense some ambiguity. This was discussed at the Rules and City Government meeting, and the sense was that we didn't have a sense of what this was directing that person to do. I agree with Alderman Payon. We are often not very specific in the directions we give our staff, and I do think that the Director of HR is very much competent enough to figure out what to do with this. So that's one point. I am in sympathy with what Alderman Lippman is saying. The second point is that, as many of you know, I send out an email to my constituents telling them what's on the agenda and telling them how I plan to vote. I had very few responses on this legislation, but none of them were encouraging me to vote for it, and some were, actually a couple were very negative about it. So I plan to abstain from the vote, given the unclear message from my constituents.
Alderman Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My reservation, I'm certainly glad that the pieces talking about punishments, that you got those out at rules. Since the legislation was passed, the prior piece of legislation regarding non-discrimination legislation, since that's been passed, I feel like we also don't need this piece of legislation. I too have talked with the HR manager, and just today, as a matter of fact, and I don't get the sense that she feels comfortable right now. I want police officers to be police officers, firemen to be firemen. I don't want anybody giving directives of any sort under guise of not following your job. And I don't know what tell me what this legislation is aimed at doing. I'd like to hear that, just real clear. Anybody. Just tell me what's, In layman's terms, what are we trying to do with the piece of legislation?
Alderman Pan?
I think the purpose is stated in lines 2 through 4, right above at the very beginning. Amending the code to incorporate provisions applicable to city employees in the performance of their duties, period. Just making sure they know about it.
Okay, and
People have asked, what did we do with the legislation from a month or two ago, and along with this, and I think this is an answer.
I'm sorry, I just think that people hired for here in the city of Annapolis know their duties right now. For life of me, I cannot believe that there's somebody on payroll receiving a check twice a month that just don't know what their duties are. And I think that everything's in order right now. Disciplinary measures, that's been here long before I got here. So I don't see the need for it right now. I just don't. I don't.
Is there any other discussion? Alderwoman Finlayson?
I think what I heard from our HR manager was that this is already being done, that there's already a document that goes into their welcome packet that speaks to this. I think there's probably a poster on every HR wall from EEOC that says you can't discriminate against anybody, and our attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, that says you can't discriminate against anybody. That's done. And that's what I heard her say also. So it's duplicative. Thank you.
There's no other discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I believe the ayes have it. Abstain? Is there a motion to adopt 0517 on third reader?
So moved.
Second.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panlady?
Aye.
Alderman Littman?
No.
Alderman Kirby?
No.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Present.
Alderman Bud?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderman Kendall Charles?
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson?
No.
Motion carries.
The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ordinance O-16-17, Market House Tenant Solicitation for the purpose of establishing a public process for selecting a Market House tenant.
Is there a motion to adopt O-1617 on second reader?
So moved.
Second? All right. Discussion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Abstain? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to adopt O-1617 on third reader?
Second.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panlady?
Aye.
Alderman Littman? Alderman Kirby? Alderman Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Bud?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderman Kendall Charles?
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ordinance O-17-17, Market House Amendments for the purpose of amending the Market House policy to reflect a tenant and subtenant relationship, clarifying Market House product and service policies, and removing the requirement for an enterprise fund.
So moved.
There's one set of amendments. They're the budge amendments from April 23rd. Will the sponsor speak to them at this time?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize to everyone. The budget amendment that I drafted this morning, the finance director has a proposed alternative, and which I would like to propose instead.
Okay.
And by way of background, several people have questioned the disappearance of the enterprise fund related to the Market House. And I would like, after I read this amendment, I would like to call upon the finance director to give us a brief explanation on why this is necessary. That is actually more pertinent to the next bill on our agenda, which is 01917. However, the fix has to take place in this code, so we're amending the fix in here. The amendment on page 5, line 24 of the bill, which basically tacks it on to the end of the existing code. Insert the following paragraph. J, the city shall account for the market house as a revolving fund, which will be included as a governmental fund. All revenues and expenditures associated with this fund shall be reflected and further reported to the city council on an annual basis in conjunction with the annual audit. Period. Yes. Page 5, line 24, insert the following paragraph J. Yes. The city shall account for the market house as a revolving fund, which will be included as a governmental fund. All revenues and expenditures associated with this fund shall be reflected and further reported to the City Council on an annual basis in conjunction with the annual audit.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would like to start
Please,
with
Director Miller.
Director
And then-
Miller.
Good evening. Bruce Miller, Finance Director, for the record. As I understood the conversation, there was a desire to have some transparency relative to the accounting of the market house. The First Amendment provided such, but the one that Alderman Budge just read goes a little bit further in that if you create a revolving fund, the funds are recorded, the revenues are recorded in that particular revolving fund. The expenditures are accounted for those in that particular revolving fund, much like the sidewalk revolving fund. All the inflows and outflows of that fund are earmarked for that purpose. So if there's a desire to maintain an accounting of those activities, the revolving fund provides for such a provides for that. But also, if, one of the reasons why we collapsed the market house into the general fund was because it was not self-sustaining. And in discussion with multiple outside entities, including the rating agencies, including our external auditors, including our financial advisors, my past practice, if I, in my opinion, it made more sense to bring into a governmental fund. And the general fund is a governmental fund, and revolving funds are a governmental fund. So for accounting purposes, we bring it in and account for it separately, but we get rid of the depreciation and some of the other components of that fund that would never allow for it to be self-sustaining. So I'm hoping that this will be a good solution, if you will, to maintain the transparency, to maintain the record keeping, if you will, but also allow for it to be part of the general governmental accounting groups. If you look at I might be going a little bit far afield, but if you look at the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, it's not even included as a major enterprise fund. It was even collapsed among other enterprise funds. So there was really never even, in the old days, if you will, a separate accounting for that particular fund. So this will maintain, both, I think, in a very organized so I'll stop with that because I'm continuing to repeat myself, but that's the primary purpose.
Any questions? Alderman Lacy?
Mr. Miller, what's the difference between a revolving fund and a government?
Quite honestly, a revolving fund is a governmental fund. And basically, it means that it's not an enterprise fund. Before, the Market House was accounted for as a enterprise fund. And one of the tenets of a enterprise fund is that it's self-supporting, or should be self-supporting. The Market House was not self-sufficient. It was not self-supporting. And that's why the different entities that I mentioned earlier recommended that it be part or pulled into the general fund. But this also, by having it as a revolving fund, it will be part of the governmental fund. So you have the general fund here, revolving funds here, a total of total governmental funds. But the accounting policies for governmental funds are consistent. And that's what we're really trying to get to, is a consistency of the accounting principles. Because if you, for an enterprise fund, you go modified accrual basis of accounting, which is totally different from governmental, which is, modified accrual for governmental funds, accrual basis for enterprise funds. So this brings in a solution that provides answers for both issues, the transparency and the accounting.
I typed it and sent it to everybody, so you should have it in your emails. Because I think we should see it. And so I just typed it in, and I emailed the amendment to everyone. So we will have it in front of us. How's that?
Yes, ma'am.
Email
Your,
or text?
I did not type your answer.
I was going to say.
We want you to repeat
Thank
it.
you. I hear we're about to have an opening for an assistant city clerk.
I'm sorry, I have a day job. Or really a night
Alderman
job.
Onet?
Yes. I should know the answer to this, but Ian and I were just talking. We don't know where in the pro forma the revolving funds show up. We talked about another one, the revolving fund for studies money. I gathered from your discussion it shows up at the end of governmental funds, but before enterprise funds?
Well, there's the sidewalk fund and now the Market House will show up at the end of the pro forma, because those funds are appropriated. New monies go in, i.e. the revenues, new expenditures. There are several different revolving funds that are not appropriated because those funds are really transferred from the general fund over to the revolving fund. For example, the monies left over for the studies are part of the planning and zoning, and then if they're not spent, rather than those going down the fund balance, they're transferred to the revolving fund. They've already been appropriated by the city council, so there's no need to reappropriate them.
The point of my question, if I, as a longtime member of the Finance Committee, can't remember where these funds are, and the purpose is to introduce transparency, I'm wondering how much transparency we're getting. Where did if someone went to the city's website and went to the financial reports and they wanted to see the revolving funds, would they be able to find them?
On the I'm going to answer in two ways. With Munis, yes, all the expenditures.
Munis, no, I'm talking about the pro forma.
On the pro forma, those funds that are appropriating new receipts and new expenditures
Right.
will be reflected on the pro forma.
Again, this is an attempt, an amendment to add transparency so people would be able to know what's happening with all of these funds in particular, but any of the other funds. And I'm not sure setting it up as a revolving fund does that, because I don't know where you would go to find a revolving fund.
Alderman Budge has a comment.
Yeah, I would like to point out this amendment proposes that the revolving fund be reported to the council annually in conjunction with the CAFR. Okay? It's sure there will be an entry of a forward-looking entry in the budget, but the reporting of what happened in the market house will be like the rest of the CAFR given to us as a discrete report.
Alderman Littman? You want to finish?
Well, yes, please. I don't see CAFR mentioned here. Where is that? That slipped by, but remember, the CAFR is 2 years old, so it's hardly a current accounting of what's happening with the revolving funds. I mean, I'm all for transparency. I was for your amendment, Alderman Budge, and I'd be willing to accept the Finance Department's amendment, except I'm not sure I see transparency there.
If it works for you, I think we could ask the city manager to also include the report in his monthly report on the revolving fund, but I think memorializing that in code might be overkill.
If I can suggest, so if we approve this and then we don't approve of 01917, we're going to have an inconsistency, right, Ms. City Attorney? So is that right?
Yes, that would be correct. Well, if you, as Alderman Budge pointed out, you have to make the fix here or in a potentially separate piece of legislation in order to correct the 01917 if you approve that. Because if you're moving out of the enterprise funds, you have to move them somewhere.
I think logically we need to take up 01917 before we take up this amendment. Otherwise, we're going to potentially set us up for an inconsistency.
Well, that's what reconsideration is for. If we shoot down 01917, then we can reconsider this.
Okay. Cross that bridge when we get there.
It would make, you don't want to agree to pass this for a few moments till we take up 01917 and then come back to this?
We're already in the middle of this. Let's get it done.
But I would point out that 019 also does not set up a revolving fund.
No.
So we're removing them, but we're not putting them in a revolving fund. I applaud the notion of transparency, but I'm not sure we're getting transparency. And I haven't been able to look at the email that Sheila sent to us. Does it say in the amendment that's now before us that this will be reported annually? And reported where?
Will be reported annually as part of the annual audit, which is the comprehensive annual financial report.
I missed the last part.
Which is, the annual audit is the CAFR.
Yeah, that's, as I said, that's 2 years old and not really, I doubt that it's accessible to too many in the general public. I mean, I would feel much more comfortable if there was a place where all of these revolving funds, including the one on the studies, shows up in the pro forma each year with the annual budgets. And I don't think they do.
Well, let's see here. Again, I think we're mixing apples and oranges. The intent of the pro forma is to appropriate revenues and expenditures. And that's why some of these revolving funds are not part of the pro forma, because those funds are already appropriated. If we're talking about the desire to have regular reporting on those revenues and expenditures, I think it was mentioned earlier, we can incorporate that in the manager's monthly report. We can do a multitude of different reporting if the desire is to see the inflows and the outflows. But I would caution not to put it on the pro forma, because again, the pro forma is the appropriation mechanism. And because you have already appropriated those dollars, now the market house, for example, if this legislation passes, will have to be part of the pro forma. It's already part of the pro forma it's part of the Public Works buildings budget. We would pull that out, and you would see, much like in the, as part of the sidewalk revolving fund, you would see a separate accounting for inflows and outflows for that particular fund. And anything that we would create in the future that, again, is not appropriated, any funds to be expended have to be appropriated. But you don't want to get into a habit of doing it twice.
Well, I will not prolong this. I think it's going to be a matter, and I hope Cindy's taking notes for the Finance Committee, but it actually bothered me when we were talking about this other revolving fund that frankly I had no awareness of, the one for the studies. And I think there are a number of revolving funds. I think there's one for the health accounts as well. And so there's all of these buckets of money that we don't see in the pro forma, and we may or may not see when we get to the CAFR. But it's just a matter of not only where the council knows where these things are, but interested members of the public need to know where these things are as well.
Tom Andrews, City Manager. Let's get out of the accounting stuff. Here's the point. For any given activity you would like us to account separately for in the budget, we can account separately for. We can keep track of it during the course of the year. We can provide reports to you at any given time, weekly, monthly, 6 months, annually, whatever you require. We can account for any activity separately. That's easy to do. All you have to do is tell us what you would like us to account for separately and how often you would like us to report it, and we can do that. Except for that.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Abstain? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to adopt O-1717 as amended on second reader?
Do we have further discussion of the underlying ordinance?
We're doing that now. We're
Thank you.
voting on as amended. Is there a second?
You're voting on the amendments, or you're voting on the underlying ordinance?
We voted on the amendments, and now we have to move to adopt it as amended. There'll be discussion, and there will be a third reader after that.
Thank you.
So is there a second? Now to discussion. Alderman Lippman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, a simple amendment. On page 4, line 11, there's a missing comma between flowers and food. What's that? No, it's not to the amendment, it's to the underlying ordinance. Okay. So in the underlying ordinance, O-1717, page 4, line 11, there should be a comma between flowers and food.
Is there a second for that amendment?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. So
All opposed? Abstaining for a semicolon? All right, the ayes have it.
Thank you. The second amendment is just before that. So I applaud Alderman Budge's work on this ordinance, and in this paragraph, it's lines 9 through 14, he's taking the phrase mercantile sales from the previous version and detailing what mercantile sales refers to. And he spells out various things like produce, meats, dairy, and to me, it's a whole bunch of things that you would expect to find in a market house, and I think it's a good list. But one thing that stands out to me is household items. That seems to be inconsistent with everything else, which refers to food and beverages, and I think would open up the tenant or subtenant to have anything that you possibly find in a house, which is quite broad, and I don't think that's what we really want the market house to be. So it's not a die on my sword type of amendment, but I think we want the market house to be focused on food and groceries and beverages, and so I move to amend to take out the words household items in the comma.
I think if you ask anybody about a market, they go to get things for their daily household, whether think about when you go to the grocery store, food, bread, maybe pick up batteries, maybe you pick up something else. I don't think it's appropriate for the council to micromanage this decision as well. Certainly things outside of our control that people in the market want. If it's successful, they'll buy it. If they don't, they don't. But for this body to come up here and say, we don't approve of selling this, I don't think is appropriate.
Are we already micromanaging by listing all the food items?
Well, potentially, but you could say the same thing about any other business, hardware store, things of that nature. If somebody was selling an item in a hardware store that wasn't predominantly a hardware store item, we wouldn't want to micromanage that.
Unless the city's opening up its own hardware store, that's not really relevant.
No, I think the point is, if you sold an item at your hardware store that wasn't the traditional definition of a hardware store item, you wouldn't want the government coming in and saying you can't sell this.
Well, I do have reporting obligations as a proprietor of a hardware store to comply with how my corporation is registered with the state. And similarly, this entity would have to comply with what we spell out right here.
True. I just think learning from the past of the market house, one of the biggest challenges, anybody downtown, talk to any business owner, let's say the government micromanages, they overregulate. So if we can't even say you can sell household items in the market house, I think that's a slippery slope. And we have to list out, every small thing from chewing gum to what I think we're going down the wrong path.
That's just the point. If you list household items, you could end up with turning a whole market house into a CVS and be a very far distant cousin to what people expect as a market house.
What item in particular are you afraid of or fearful of?
There's nothing I'm afraid of about household items, Mr. Mayor. This is not about fear. It is what I expect the residents want from a market house. And I think they're looking for food, a place to get food and beverages, and everything else that's here about consumption, either on site or take home. I think all that makes sense. I don't think we want to open the door to have the market house turned into by a tenant to have a subtenant like a CVS.
I think we would have a CVS. Alderman Budge?
The intent here is...
Point of order, I didn't hear a second.
My intent in writing this language was not to place a pharmacy in the market house. There are a number of different products that it's arguable that one finds in a grocery store these days. It's arguable whether or not they're actually groceries. You can get the pens, notepads, other items that it's conceivable someone may want to carry in here. My point was to not be overly restrictive, but to connote the idea that we are talking about a market here, not not some other kind of business. And I'd also like to point out that in the further down in this legislation, the lease agreement will include the vendor's business plan, which will be agreed upon by the city council. And if the tenant wanders off of that business plan, they have to come back to the city council for a discussion on how they do so. So if we start out with a market that we all agree on as a market, and it wanders off into Bed Bath & Beyond land or something like that, then they've got to come back here and say, you know, excuse me, we've changed our mind, and we, the council, represent the people and have to, and deal with that.
Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have one constituent who commented on this, and the point that that person made was they were afraid this would open the door for tourist items. Now, when I read this, my sense was, being a boater, and actually being a boater who most of my boating life did not live in Annapolis, but sailed to Annapolis, I thought it would be helpful. Suppose I wanted to pick up insect repellent or some other kind of thing which isn't a grocery consumable. I actually think this would be a service, and so I'm afraid I don't share the fear that somebody's going to run amok with household items, but I agree with Alderman Budge. If they should, then we can review their business plan and say, don't do that anymore.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Oh,
No.
no, I'm sorry. Sorry.
The
Sorry,
noes,
so did I.
the noes have it. Is there any other discussion? Is there a motion to adopt O 1717 on third reader?
So moved.
Apologize, we have to go back for a second. Is there a motion to adopt O 1717 as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Is there a motion to adopt O 1717 on third reader?
So moved.
Second.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panlady?
Aye.
Alderman Lippman?
Abstain.
Alderman Kirby? Alderman Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Lippman?
Aye.
Alderman Bayonne?
Aye.
Alderman Kendall Cullen?
Aye.
Alderman Finley?
Aye.
The ayes have it. We're going to take a 10-minute break and reconvene. City Council is now back in session. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item on our agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ordinance O-19-17, removing dock and market house enterprise funds for the purpose of removing the requirement that the annual budget shall contain separate dock and market house enterprise fund groups.
Is there a motion to adopt O-19-17 on second reader? Is there discussion? Alderman Arnett?
First of all, our financial advisors have strongly recommend we do this. In fact, we did it last year with the budget, so it's kind of good that we cover it with legislation. But I do think this is one of those things that we don't want to get lost, and it's another area where it would be good to continue to have transparency. And so I simply wonder if we shouldn't have some language about these monies being accounted for in a revolving fund in the governmental fund. I guess I would look to the finance director for guidance on that.
Good evening. Again, if you want the transparency, I just was explaining that if they are commingled as a department, if you will, cost center in the general fund, The revenues will flow as a general fund revenue. It'll be classified separately, just as, all of the different local receipts, fees, et cetera. So you'd be able to see that, but you would have to go to different parts of the general ledger to see the activity. So if you want to put or create revolving fund for the market house or any other activity for that matter, it's not a burden. We can do it. We'd be more than happy to do it. To give everybody the comfort level that the inflows and outflows are appropriately accounted for.
Right. I mean, as the city manager said, maybe we can just put this not in the pro forma, but as an addendum to the pro forma. So every year when we're working on the budget, we're reminded, either that or we go ask Carl to get his copy of these things.
We'd be very happy to accommodate any other wishes.
Thank you. Do we need to do anything here to discuss that, or is that just a financial procedure?
If it doesn't hurt to say, if you want to codify it and say it shall be reported as, it does provide that coverage, if you will. So it's understood that the market, any other activity is accounted for as a revolving fund.
So would that be C or just another line in B on page 2 down around line 25?
I would suggest that rather than making up amendments on the fly on this one,
Come on, you're no fun.
that we postpone this and to allow us to work out appropriate amendments and bring it back.
Postpone is our best thing.
So is that a motion to postpone until the next meeting?
Sure is.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is proposed motion to postpone resolutions R2116, Catherine Properties Annexation and Public Facilities Agreement Status, R2316, Rogers Property Annexation and Public Facilities Agreement Status, and R2416, Annexation Resolutions Implementation Status not to exceed 90 days, or to vote to adopt or defeat pursuant to City Code Section 2.16.090B.
Alderman Kirby?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I believe Mr. Blonder was here earlier, and he intended to speak during the comment section, and I think he inadvertently signed the wrong sheet. So if we can, while we're still going to do some Market House legislation, I guess he's going to speak to the Market House, and I'd certainly like to give him an opportunity to hear what he has to say. Well, it is out of order.
It is out of order.
We're in the middle of disposing or doing something. I would certainly be more than happy to hear from Mr. Blonder, but I'd rather do it after we've disposed of these 3 items.
We could. I think it might be appropriate. Everybody has busy schedules to do that now. We'll certainly be here the rest, so if there's not objection, your customary.
So have these been moved and seconded yet?
No.
No, I've just merely read the item one.
Mr. Blonder, if you'd like to come forward and give us a little bit of background or context on it.
Good evening. I just wanted to bring to the attention of the alderman and the mayor the Market House situation. We have been in there with the last administration who tried to successfully run the Market House, and they were very unsuccessful at running it. And they requested us to come into the Market House, the last administration, and they requested us to set up certain businesses. And the businesses that we set up were not businesses that we basically chose. It was the Market House manager that chose the various businesses that were in there. A couple of the businesses that were there during our 5-year term were not able to support themselves and take care of their expenses. We stepped in, our family, and we paid their expenses, and we covered them and brought everything up to date with the city. The city has had no problems with us. They've been up to date, and they are up to date today. The Market House, prior to us taking over, and we do not have all of it, we have the majority of it, our family, in various businesses, has had its course of building a new business, and in no way, shape, or form would have we ever gone into the Market House with the real estate knowledge that we have in our family for a 5-year lease and spend the amount of money that we spent to put the Market House back in to business. We did this in good faith of the city, and there were certain things that the city administration said when I asked for a longer lease. They said that we have gotten everything approved, and we cannot, it will take a lot longer to get it approved for a longer time at this particular time. And they more or less, and of course there's no promises in life, gave us the assurance that our lease would be renewed when it came time to be renewed. And we went on the promises, the assumption of the city, and we did what I think is a fairly good job. As I say, if the city wants a grocery store, certainly they can have a grocery store. But whatever the city wants, they have to subsidize. They have to understand business. They have to understand how it is. Where are you going to store your groceries? Where are you going to have your surplus items? The city has, which I think Alderman Budge is doing the right thing. I think competitive bid is good for everybody. And I think a grocery store would be fabulous for the people downtown. But it's a matter of economics. If the city wants to give next to nothing rent or free rent, I'm not even sure a grocery store can make it unless everybody supports it. But if everybody does support it, and all the local residents and the voters and the people that come in, I think it's a fabulous idea. But that's not always the case. And the case in the city of Annapolis, in my little talk here, is not to get it. If a competitive bid takes it away, that's perfectly all right. I understand it. We've been in business a long time. But the thing is that we're there. We've gone through the bad times. We've supported the bad times. The city, the aldermen, have not had to deal with it other than their own responsibilities that they have to deal with. And you don't know what you may get in there. Years ago, you got somebody in there. Then you got somebody else in there, and it created a lawsuit against the city and lost the city a couple $1 million plus. And then people went in there and moved out in the middle of the night. And you're thinking back many years ago when George Hannon was in there and when the vegetable stand was in there and everybody else. And we've gone to several of those people, tried to get them into the Market House. Not those exact, you know, you wanted fried chicken, we put in fried chicken. You wanted an oyster bar, we put in an oyster bar. And then you have certain people, you can't please 100% of the people. But we've made a sizable investment that may be taken away, and if it does, as I say, certainly we can. And if you do want a grocery store, then the city should give free rent or next to free. You'll get yourself a grocery store operator, and they may or may not survive. But maybe they will, which would be a fabulous asset for downtown Annapolis. I would love to see it because it affects everybody's business around. And us other businessmen want to see success. One successful operation certainly helps on the others. But I think as politicians, I think you got to think about what's there now and what might be there in the future if the bidding process or you put certain restrictions or you try to micromanage your tenants. That's no way to do it. There's certain things. People change. You set up a business, an entrepreneur has an idea, it doesn't work, you got to be able to change. And you need to take all this into consideration in the future whenever you form some type of lease that the city's going to lease to everybody. That's all I have to say. You know, if you want to use me as a constructive mechanism to learn and understand, businesses in downtown Annapolis and what you're marketing to. I'm very happy to help you. My family would be very happy to help you. We want to see it successful, whether we operate it or somebody else operates it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, as a reread, the next item on the agenda is a proposed motion to postpone resolutions R2116, Catherine Properties Annexation and Public Facilities Agreement Status, R2316, Rogers Property Annexation and Public Facilities Agreement Status, and R2416, Annexation Resolutions Implementation Status not to exceed 90 days, or to vote to adopt or defeat pursuant to City Code Section 2.16.090B.
Is there a motion to postpone R2116, R2316, and R2416 until the special meeting of July 24th, 2017? Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Yes.
Alderman Arnett?
I guess I'd really like to know from the administration, what is the status, what is really going on? Is there any negotiation going on? Is there any purpose to continuing to negotiate these different resolutions? I think the impetus for these came from a now twice removed city attorney, and I'm not sure where the zeal is for these things with that person gone. So, I mean, I'm more than happy to vote to postpone to continue, but I'd like to know that we really are engaging in some kind of negotiation.
If you wouldn't mind, I can answer that. As you indicated, former City Attorney Michael Leahy drafted the original legislation. Since then, there's been a couple changes, including Assistant City Attorney Gary Elson, when he was acting, proposed some variations or different thoughts. Since then, he has provided me with substantial changes for what he would like seen done to this legislation. I have that before me. I'm going to review both former City Attorney Leahy's original legislation as well as Assistant City Attorney Gary Elson's recommendations. There is interest, at least from at least one of the development parties, for this to continue to move forward, so I'm going to try and be the perhaps hopefully final third arbitrator, third acting city attorney, who will make final recommendations on these for your review and approval or non-approval, whatever you want to do. But I hope to do so. I already have it on my desk as a to-do item. I printed out my own research, so I see no problems with having this on the agenda in July.
Madam City Clerk?
Okay, I just wanted to say for the record that with this being an election year, this is actually the last time you can extend this legislation 90 days because the council does not meet in August, and you only have September and the last meeting in October to pass the legislation, or it will die pursuant to the legislation Alderman Israel introduced.
Good.
Alderman Littman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to point out that there are 3 sponsors of this legislation, of which I'm one. And since we've introduced this, which I did at the request of Mr. Leahy many moons ago, I haven't been included in any discussions.
The discussions have been very recent. All I've had at this point, if they happened last week, Mr. Elson provided me with his notes, and that's the extent that I've gotten to at this point. I will keep everyone in the loop as I make my evaluation and my recommendations, including making sure that this body is aware of it so that they can make an informed decision come July.
Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is legislative actions on first reader, beginning with O-23-17, Certificate of Adequate Public Facilities, Police Protection, for the purpose of defining police officer, as the term is used in connection with review criteria and certification for adequate police protection under Chapter 22.14 of the City Code.
Is there a motion to adopt O-2317 on first reader?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. I refer O-2317 to Rules and City Government. and the Transportation Committee, and also the Public Safety Committee at the request of council members. Madam City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I believe the agenda has been completed.
Is there anything else for the good of the order? Madam City Attorney, or Clerk?
I would just like to inform the city council at this time that we will be meeting your city council associate. Cindy Gaines was the only applicant that applied for the city clerk, deputy city clerk's position that Hillary's leaving on the 5th of May. So the single resource manager told me that.
Oh, no, we can't have that.
You don't have to be so happy about it.
Really?
Do I sense a trend here?
Very nice. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Alderman Budge?
Point of order first on 02317. Since it's dealing with adequate public facilities, does it have to be referred to the Planning Commission?
I can certainly refer to your request.
I'm not requesting it if it doesn't need to go there, but I'm wondering if statutorily it has to go there.
We can look into that, and if it is, I'll certainly make that referral.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, I guess my question is for Mr. Andrews. Since we will find ourselves without a council staff person, do we want to put a committee together as we did before to begin interviewing? Does the new position take effect next month? Do we know when, or?
When we had a conversation with the HR manager, she said that that typically when you're sitting in a position that you could move into the new position within 2 weeks, but that's kind of different for our office because I supervise both people. So we could manage to take care of the standing committees until the term.
Not standing,
The standing committee. Cindy took care of the standing committee.
oh, okay, not
So we could
boards and
still
commissions.
take care of that and hire somebody and train them at the same time. So Cindy and I would cover the standing committees until we actually trained another person. But whatever you need to do to get that person here, we would appreciate it.
I would like to request that we begin the process as soon as possible. You know how I feel about adding more work to an already full plate. I don't have to go down that, but so please, thank you.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.